Hello, everybody, and welcome to FM Academy. My name is John Mathewson, and I will be your moderator today. And our topic is going to be an interesting one, and it's going to be called Protecting Your Users and Data in a Cloud Environment. And I think we'll all agree that this is a very important topic in today's security-issued world, where so many people are concerned about making sure that their personal information and other information is properly protected in our interconnected environment. Our speaker today is Tim Neudecker, and Tim is an expert on security issues, amongst many other things. And I will have a little bit more time in a second to tell you more about Tim's background. Our seminar today is being brought to you by the FM Academy. I think many of you have probably attended other sessions, and I think you will find that they're very valuable. There's a lot of fact-filled information. And the FM Academy was formed by a group of platinum-level FileMaker companies that wanted to promote the product of FileMaker and also promote best practices. We're firm believers that FileMaker is a wonderful tool for solving business problems and solving organizational data issues, and it has to be used correctly. And so we formed the FM Academy as a mechanism to let people know about that and spread the word. Today is actually our 25th webinar, which is, I think, pretty exciting that we've done so many. And there's a lot of information that you can also look up on YouTube if you want to look up some past webinars. And we'll talk about that a little bit towards the end. Today's webinar is being hosted by Logic. We are a company located in Westport, Boston, and Brewster, so we basically cover the New York and Connecticut and Massachusetts markets. So we're focused on the Northeast. We are a FileMaker Platinum Business Alliance member. And we tend to service a number of key industries, including financial, healthcare, ad agencies, legal, manufacturing, a number of different. So we have quite a bit of experience in dealing with different types of companies, many of whom have very high security needs. And so we're quite familiar with some of the issues that are covered and need to be covered in that important area. Before I turn to our speaker, I'd like to introduce him. Tim Neudecker is my partner. We founded the company just at the beginning of 2003. Tim I've known since 1998 when he joined us to head up our FileMaker development, and he's a true expert. I think that in our company we turn to him. He is definitely our technical lead and extremely knowledgeable about many elements of FileMaker, not only from a development standpoint, but also from a deployment, server, all the various tools that are extremely important in making sure that FileMaker works correctly. As you can see, he's got 22 years of experience. He's been certified 7 through 12, but in fact he was also certified in 5 and 6 back in the days when we used to take proficiency tests. He's been a frequency speaker at DevCon, and he loves to present. He is presenting constantly at the Connecticut and Boston and Philly user groups where he is well appreciated for his expertise and his communication skills. Before we turn to our session, I'd like to just do a little bit of housekeeping. I will be acting as the moderator during this, and during the session, if you have a question of Tim, feel free to post it in the panel. You'll see there's a section where you can submit questions, and all you have to do is submit that, and at the end we will come back and address questions that are raised. If there's anything that is important during the session, I will attempt to answer your question back to you if it's a housekeeping thing, and I will answer you in text. So without any further ado, let's turn to Tim, who will talk to you about security in the cloud environment. Tim?
Thank you, John. Hi, everybody. I'm Tim, and today we're here to talk about protecting your users and data in the cloud environment. And I want to put a little frame around what we're going to talk about today, because security is a rather large topic, and I could probably speak for days on it. So I want to have some focus today, and today will be the cloud. Everybody's had FileMaker Pro databases for a long time, and usually they start out as small systems. Maybe you're keeping track of a parts list, and then it grows into a purchase order system. Then the next thing you know, your system's taking orders from clients, and then a couple of years later, you're storing credit cards because you've linked it to your website and you're downloading orders, and your order entry people are entering credit card numbers. And I have found over time that a lot of companies whose systems grow like this never go back and think about the security in their system since the first day they deployed it. They still have the security of when it was just a purchase order tracking system, Now they have all this valuable data in there, and they're exposing this data to the internet now. With the great success of FileMaker Go, these databases are being exposed online, and the security is never being reviewed. So I'm going to focus mostly today on securing things for online access and how to keep everything safe and happy. The big thing to remember when doing this is we work with FileMaker. It's all about rapid application development. And we don't want to overburden our solution with security so much so that the users lose the magic of FileMaker Pro and the rapid application development and the ease of use. So we're going to take that in mind today, but the other big thing we're going to have in mind for this whole presentation is doing this in a very cost-effective manner. We can always throw money at the problem and put in great big complex systems, but that again is against the nature of FileMaker Pro in doing things effectively, quickly, and at low cost with lots of high return on investment. So what is cloud storage? How does this work? Well, basically we've had FileMaker Pro servers, and what I'm going to refer to for cloud storage today is when you take your FileMaker server and you expose it to the internet. You open up that port in your router and you let anybody out in the world with FileMaker Go, any of your employees, come into the system, or FileMaker Pro, or even Instant Web Publishing or PHP Publishing. But now you don't have to be on a local network to get at your data. Some folks may even do co-location, where you take your server because you can't get fast enough internet in the office, and you store your server with another vendor. Now you don't even have physical access to your server. You can just address it over the internet. Or an even more cost-effective way, which has become very popular in the last few years, is shared space. There are many vendors out there where you can send them your FileMaker file, and they'll place it on one of their servers with all their other customers, and you'll just access it over the internet. They take care of your backups and all that fun stuff, and they charge a minimal amount. So we're going to talk about how to keep your data safe in those environments. So how do we manage this risk on our company when we expose this to the internet without breaking the bank? We need to put some scale on breaking the bank. What is the real cost? In 2010, there was a study done, and it was found that it costs over $200 to the owners of the database when their systems get broken into for every record lost. So imagine you have your order entry system and you lose 4,000 customer records. That can get expensive pretty darn quick. So we really have to look out from that. And a lot of those fees come from your bank, because when the bank finds fraud and things being stolen, they're going to pass those charges right back down to you. Fees, people can sue you, all kinds of nasty stuff when you lose information. Don't worry about writing down these URLs for my references. Every URL that I will reference in the presentation today will be included in a blog post that will be on our website at the end of this session. So you'll be able to kind of get your notes after the meeting. So the first easy thing you can do to help protect your data and still allow access from the internet is set up a VPN. This is a virtual private network. Both Macintoshes and Windows can run VPNs without having to install any third-party software. This is all the open source protocols such as IPsec, SSL, PPTP. But you can also run commercial VPN methods like Cisco VPNs, Sonic Walls, all these other methods you've probably heard of. And they will allow somebody in the field, whether from a computer, an iOS device, whatever it may be, to make a direct connection to the office that is encrypted and route all traffic to and from the office through this encrypted protocol. Now, the great benefit of this is that nobody else can get at those resources behind the firewall. So it's very easy to control who has access to your inside resources within your network. Now, a VPN may not be practical for all cases, such as if you're doing a colo. You may not be able to get a VPN up with the colo location. So this may not be applicable for everybody, so we'll have to talk about some other ways to secure our data. But VPNs have another side effect. You can flip them into what I call hostile mode. This is when you're at Starbucks or the airport and you're on their free Wi-Fi. Because when you get on the free Wi-Fi, which has no password, all your data is sent in the clear, which means anybody else sitting around you in the coffee shop can see everything else you're doing on that Wi-Fi connection. They can just watch your email go by in the clear, plain text, watch your packets to and from your FileMaker server. So you can set up a VPN and tell the VPN, hey, don't just send my traffic to the office through the encrypted channel, send all my traffic through this VPN and encrypt everything to make yourself safe. So, and you may not think these environments are hostile. You know, Starbucks is nice and friendly, but who knows what that kid in the corner with the laptop is doing? They can be listening to everything, recording everything, and then go home and play with it later. So the first thing we want to do to make our connection to our server secure is turn on secure connections in FileMaker Pro Server. So within the console, on the security tab, we have a setting called secure connections. Turn that on. With today's computers, I doubt you'll see much of a performance hit at all, if any. And this will let you have SSL encryption, which is the same encryption used when you go to secure websites, banking websites. It's the same protocols and the same methodology with certificates and everything, and it's great. Turn that on. You want it. We'll come back to this progressive downloading in a little bit, and we'll talk about the other options in a bit. But first thing, no matter what, turn on your secure connections. The next thing we want to think about is our container fields. With FileMaker 12, we were given the ability to store container field data outside of our database. And there's an option here called secure storage. What's that all about? Well, a lot of people, I forget where I took this photo, think that just because they label something as my database is secure, that it's safe. They're not encrypting the data. We need to make sure our data is safe. If you make a container field have external storage and you do not turn on secure data, anybody who has access to your FileMaker Pro server can follow the directory structure down to where FileMaker server is storing these images and actually open those individual images or Excel files, excuse me, or Word documents. They're all exposed. And anybody who can see your backups can see those. Any system admin can see those. Any user who has access to your server. But with one click of a mouse, we can turn on encrypted storage for those container fields, and all of a sudden the files are completely obfuscated and encrypted. So not only are they encrypted, but the file size and file names are fully obfuscated, so you can't even tell what kind of data is being stored there. So you don't have to worry about the person who's doing the backups on your server getting into your precious HR files and reading performance reviews that may have been uploaded into the system. So we were talking about that other checkbox about progressive downloads. This is an option in container fields that allows users to start working with container data before it's fully downloaded. And as you work with cloud servers, this option becomes more and more wanted, I guess, for lack of a better term, because it speeds things up. You can download a large PDF. You can start reading the first few pages while the other pages are downloading, or start watching a movie stored in the container field before the entire movie is downloaded. It gives that streaming effect. But the problem is when you do progressive downloads, they don't go through encrypted channels, but they do use the same server port as the FileMaker administration console. So we need to lock down our admin console so that if you turn this feature on, people on the outside can't try to take control of your server. So again, we don't want people to get near our server. So we need to limit that console access. So we do that again within the server console. On the database server section, we just go to the admin console tab, and there's a nice little checkbox there that says, hey, enable access restrictions. And what that does, if you don't put in any IP address, it means, hey, you can only run the admin console from the FileMaker server. You actually have to be at a keyboard or a remote desktop into that server to bring up the admin console. Now, if you want, you can specify an IP address and say these specific machines are allowed to connect to my server and control it and make changes. So please do that if you're exposing your server to the internet. User accounts are the next, well, in my opinion, one of the most important thing you can set up within your file to make it secure. You want to disable the default accounts that come with the server. Create your developer account, turn off that admin account that comes with it, turn off that guest access account. Don't let your users share accounts. What happens if one employee leaves the company in a huff and somebody else doesn't? Now you've got to change that shared password for everybody. Why not just give everybody their own account and only have one account to manage? And also it helps with your logging so you know who's doing what. Require good passwords. Make people change their passwords regularly. How can we do that if FileMaker Pro is managing our system? It doesn't really give us a way to expire accounts on a time basis and to verify that passwords are of a certain length and contain certain characters. And then we run into trouble of a lot of users already have a network ID within their company. Wouldn't it be nice if that same network ID let them into FileMaker Pro? And FileMaker will actually do that. You can actually tie FileMaker Pro to your domain, whether it's Macintosh or Windows, and the users can use their network IDs to log into and out of FileMaker Pro and manage their data. This has a lot of really nice side effects. One, it makes your network managers very happy because it lets them manage the users, which is really their job, managing users. It makes life easier for your users because they only have one password to remember, and those passwords have enforcement from the domain. So when they have to change their network ID password, it also affects their FileMaker password, and it will save the database administrators a lot of work because every time a new user comes into the system, they don't have to go create an account in every file in FileMaker Pro for that new users. So as systems change over time, imagine if you had an old FileMaker Pro 6 system that involved 80 files and it has been migrated all the way up to FileMaker 12 and you haven't been able to consolidate it down to much fewer than 40 files. Every time you add a user, you've got to go through 40 files or write complex scripts that go through your files to create and modify and manage those user accounts. So let's let the network domain manage that for us. But I don't have a domain. What am I going to do? I can't take advantage of this great feature. Well, actually you can. If you're running your FileMaker server on a real server machine, it doesn't necessarily have to be a member of a domain to take advantage of this. You could still create user accounts and groups on this FileMaker server machine. And when you do, FileMaker server will honor those. You just need to do the same setup you would as if you were doing a full-fledged domain. You won't get single sign-on because your users' computers will not be members of the domain, but they can still use that domain account to log into the system, which is just great because it gives you one place to manage all your user accounts. It's a great idea, again, if you're supporting a solution with many files. So let's talk about how we would set this up. The first thing we would need to do is go into our FileMaker server and tell it, hey, use the domain to let people become authorized for access to files. Okay, and you'll see the client authentication, and we would just simply say FileMaker and external server accounts. And FileMaker server takes care of all the rest of the lifting and linking to the domain. You just have to make sure you have your Active Directory or Open Directory running on that machine, and you don't have to worry about configuring any other slave machines or trees or forests or any of that other domain stuff. Just simply turn on Active Directory and you're rocking. Okay, so what else do we need to do though once we turn on Active Directory? Well, you need to create your security groups in Active Directory. Now this may sound complex if you've never looked at a directory, but it's honestly as easy as opening up the program called Active Directory Users and Computers and hitting the New button from File. And when you do, you'll be presented with this dialog box. All you have to type in is a group name and a description for that group. Then you save it. Then you create a user, and all you have to do to create a user is create a username, a long name, a short name, and then place them in groups by simply adding the groups with the add button to that user. And that will give that user access to those various FileMaker Pro groups. And we'll talk about how we link those into our database next. Because we'll go to FileMaker Pro, and we're going to create privilege sets. Privilege sets, we're not going to go into a lot of detail on that because it's getting kind of past the cloud idea today. But a privilege set is a group of privileges, for lack of a better term, that a user has within a FileMaker profile. It tells whether or not they can read, write records, delete records, edit records, all that fun stuff, go to layouts, edit scripts, and we're going to create some privilege sets later on in the demo part of this group. But we're going to create a privilege set, naming it whatever we like, in this case, Proofing Manager, and we're going to set up what this person can do. And then we're going to create an account, just like we would normally create an account for a user, and we type in John Doe and their password. But in this case, we're going to say this account is authenticated by an external server, and all we have to do is tell what the name of the group is on the server that we added John Doe to, and then what privilege set goes with that group. So in this case, the apptc creative group in our domain is linked to the privilege set creative. So when a user logs in and they're a member of the apptc creative group, they will then be given the privileges of a creative user within our solution. You can see your list of privilege sets in FileMaker Pro after you've set them all up, as well as what accounts have access to those privileges and the descriptions. And it's pretty easy to see your list. You can sort them by different things, but probably the most important thing to look at is authentication order when you do view by. And you're probably wondering, what the beep is authentication order? Well, if we look back to this user that we set up, this user is a member of many different groups. So when he logs into this FileMaker Pro file, FileMaker Pro is going to ask the domain, hey, I have a person here named Tim and he gave me this password. What groups does he belong to? And the domain server is going to respond and say, hey, Tim's a member of all these groups, and it's going to give FileMaker that list. And when it does, FileMaker Pro is going to go down in authentication order and say, is he a member of Client Manager Web? Nope. Is he a member of Creative? Yes. And it's going to log him in as a creative member. So if a user is a member of more than one group, they will come in by the first group in authentication order that they are a member of. So this is helpful if you have multiple users. I like to set it up as you see here so that they come in with the lowest privileges possible if somebody is given multiple groups when they shouldn't be. So a creative person will come in as a creative, not a creative manager if they were given both privileges. And that way it's up to the IT folks who manage the domain to decide, well, let's take him out of the creative group so he'll fall into the creative managers group. It helps prevent accidents if people are put into multiple groups when they shouldn't be. But what about my database? How does this work using the domain? If you use the get account name, it will return the domain account name for the user, so you still have full access to all the account functions that you normally have. You could set up a domain group for full access so developers can log in with a domain password. I don't recommend that. I don't think it's a wise thing to do, because if somebody ever gets physical access to your files, it would be possible for them to set up their own domain controller and set up the group and let themselves log into your file with an account they created. But also it allows your server admin to make himself a member of that group and log into your files with full access. So while the person who runs the server, they may not need full access to the files, or you may not want them to have full access to the files if you're storing HR documents and things of that nature. So keep those as FileMaker files, FileMaker accounts. Don't do those with domain groups. What if all your computers aren't on the domain? Again, it's what we spoke about earlier. They can still type in the domain account name and password and log into the file because it's all authenticated from the server, not from the user's desktop. So what I'd like to do now is a quick demo, show you a file, look at making some of these privilege sets, talk about some full access and some fun things like that. So I'm going to jump out and I'm going to open up FileMaker Pro. Okay, I'm going to log into the demo file, and the account for this file is admin. This file will be on the blog posting at the end of the session so everybody can download it along with all the URLs that we're going to reference. And this is a pretty simple flat file. I have some text up at the top of the screen just using the new display variables to show us what the account name and the privilege set is that's logged in. And we can see we have 4 fields. We have a user's name, a birth date, a secret field that's managed by a privilege set, and we have a math field. Basically just adds 100 to the secret field. So everybody can see that. Now, if I log into this file as a user, and I'm running the script step, relogin file with the username just to make this fast, you can see that the limited user who is in the privilege set limited user is not permitted to see the field secret by priv because we've hidden that field by the privilege set. But notice our math still works. The math engine in FileMaker Pro has full access to all fields in all tables in that file. Okay, So you have to be careful with evaluate functions and things like that if you expose those to users, because they could write a calculation to let them see information they're not allowed to see. So be very careful when you expose the calculation engine to users. Another thing this privilege set limits is it doesn't let me change the date field. I have that field set as read only. So let's take a look at this privilege set real quick. I'm going to log back in as the administrator. I'm going to go to File, Manage, whoops, Security, and you can see we have the default account. I left that in for the demo purpose, so when you get the file, it's easy instead of giving you some weird name and password. We have our user account. We can see they're a member of the limited user privilege set, and I have my own account in the file. So I'm going to go to privilege sets, and I'm going to look at the limited user privilege set by double clicking on it. And right off the top, we see we give it a description. I'm going to go through the other privileges first. I'm allowed to print. They can't export. We disconnect from FileMaker server when idle. You should really turn this on. This only affects non-full access privilege sets. And when the user hits the idle timeout on the server, it boots that user out of that file. This is important for a good reason. If you have a user who works from home and they connect to your system over the internet, if they get up and go do something at home, maybe start working on the laundry, you want to boot them out of their files while they go to get the kids maybe at school, so somebody else can't sit down at their desk and start working with that file, because you don't know what the security is like at their house. So you want to boot them out whenever possible so they don't leave your files open and exposed. Okay, so I'm going to look at the custom privileges now that we've set up for this file. We have one table called data. This user can view the data, and I can easily change this down here or say yes, and we can tell whether they can edit, whether they can create records. They can't delete records. And any one of these options, you can choose the limited. Well, let me come back over here. We can choose limited, and we can expose the calculation engine to say, if this record was made after this date, don't allow deleting, or if record has a flag that is checked for locked, don't allow editing. So anything you can do with the calc engine, you can do here. The result has to be a yes or a no, a 1 or a 0, just like an if statement. And FileMaker Pro will evaluate that whenever that function happens to that record, whether it's a delete, a create, an edit, or a view. Well, now we're going to look at the field access, limited. And this is where I set the secret by privilege set field to not be accessible. I just simply check that field. And then there's another field called birth date. I set that to view only, so the user wouldn't be able to edit that field when they have this privilege set. So let's close this out, and let's just take a look at it one more time. And I'm not going to save my changes. Oops, I'll hit cancel, discard. And we're going to log back in as the limited user. And you'll see our field disappears. And when we come up, we can't edit the dates. But maybe we want the user to be able to change that date, but under certain circumstances, and we don't quite know what our formula would be. Well, the scripting engine has the ability to run as full access. So you can write a script that can do things the user can't do. In this case, I have a script that edits that field. So I can come in here and change this to whatever I like, say OK, and we'll see that that data changes. And again, the field is not modifiable. Well, let's take a look at that script and see how that's happening. I'm going to re-log in as an administrator. I'm going to go into Manage Scripts, open the edit date, and it's one line. And we'll see it's just using the custom dialog, and I set that field as the input field. So a normal script for editing a field like that. But the magic is down here at the bottom with this checkbox, Run Script with Full Access Privileges. That allows this script to do anything a full access person can, even if the script was run by somebody who's not full access. Now that brings some danger with it, because anybody who can run this script can make the script do full access stuff. So you need to control who can run this script and when. So let's not save our changes to that. And let's quickly look at these relogin scripts. I don't know how many folks have ever used the relogin command. It's pretty straightforward. You specify a username and a password, and it lets you change between your accounts. I don't recommend you create these scripts in your solutions very often, or at least not with passwords stored in them. I would leave those blank, and I'll show you why here in just a minute. So let's close this up. Let's not save changes. And let's just watch that script run one more time. So I can come down here. I can go over to, oh, we're in with full access. Let's go in as a user who can't edit. But when I run this script, here, let's turn on the script debugger. No, never mind. Let's just deviate. Edit. You do not have privilege. Oh, I'm sorry. That's my script debugger popping up. Let me turn off the script debugger. Let's change this to 2009. Say OK. And there it is. Quick and easy. So even though somebody doesn't have privilege to edit that, you can control that with your scripts of whether or not they can edit those fields. Okay, so what I want to show now is the concept of rogue files. I'm going to close my script manager. We're currently logged in as a user in this file. I'm going to make a new database. And I'm going to put it on my desktop, and I'm going to call it rogue. And there's my new file. And I'm not going to put any tables in it. I'm not going to make any fields or anything. What I'm going to do is come up here under Manage Scripts. I'm going to make a new script. And I'm going to call this Hunter. And I want to look at that file we just made. I'm going to come over here. And instead of looking at the rogue file, I'm going to point it at our demo file. And look at that. I can see all the scripts in that demo file, whether they're visible or not in the script menu. That also means I can select a script and say OK. So I just made a new FileMaker profile, and I pointed it at the other file, and I made a script that calls the go to admins function. So if I come down here and I run that script, oh my God, we're now full access in that file. That's why I was saying we don't want to have those relogin scripts that have passwords stored in them. Because somebody with a rogue file can run those at will. Also, I could come up here and take my Hunter script and I could change it. Let's run the edit date function. And you're probably saying to yourself, well, why in the world would I ever use that full access function then? Well, you got to be very careful when you do it. So now if we run that, hey, look at that. I just triggered the edit function in that file without being in that file. So how can we prevent that? How can we stop these rogue files from looking into our databases and doing stuff we don't want them to do? Before I show you, let me show you one more really scary thing. Let's go into Define Database, go into Relationships, and I'm going to look into the demo file, and I'm going to put that table in our relationship. I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to log in as user. So we're a user. We're not allowed to see that field, and we're not allowed to edit that field. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to go into Layout mode. I'm going to make a new layout, and we're going to base it on the data table. And let's make a table view. And look at that. There's all those fields. Let's just see them all. Go next, next, next. Finish. Look at that. We can see all the data in that file. But notice the secure secret by priv isn't here. Even though we're in a different file, the FileMaker privilege set still prevents us from getting to the data. But what is this field? This hidden field. It says hire, hire, and fire. Where's that? I don't see that over here. Wonder what's going on. Let's log in as an admin, and if we go define fields, we'll see that the developer had created a field called hidden field and thought it would be safe because it's not in any layout. It's only used by script, so no user would ever see it. Well, our rogue file can see that. Not only can they see it, they can change it. Okay? So we really have to prevent these rogue files from showing up in our systems. So how do we do that? Well, let's go back to FileMaker Pro. You have to be logged in with an account that says full access. We're going to go to the File menu. I'm going to go to Manage Security, where we set up our privilege sets. And we're going to look at File Access. And this is where you can control what files can look into this FileMaker profile. And I'm going to say, hey, require full access privileges to make links into this file. And I'm going to say yes right here. And what it does is it says, hey, here are all the files that have relationships or script calls into this file. And they were authorized by the account admin at this time and date. I don't want that rogue file to see my file, so I'm going to deauthorize it. Okay, so it's gone. But it's still, we have the option, require full access privileges to use references to this file. So now we'll say okay. And it wants to make sure that we're an admin before we do this. So I'm going to say admin, admin. And here, let me just get that out of our way. Let's look at that rogue file again now. Okay, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to log in as a limited user. So we should not be allowed to see our secret, and we should not be allowed to edit the date. Yep. And I'm going to open our rogue file up again. And it says, hey, rogue FileMaker Pro 12 is not authorized to open the protected file. So even though we put relationships into it before, we've now booted them out. And if I say don't let them in there, it says fields missing. It can't see that file anymore. That external data source has been turned off. It won't let us in the door because we don't have privileges. But if we want to let it have privileges, we have to call somebody, our database admin, our developer, and they have to put in their privileges to get access. So you as a programmer can still make links to files and still do all this and make it work. Okay, but only files you control, that you allow, will have access. So this is a really important feature brought in with FileMaker Pro 12, and I highly recommend you use it and lock down your files now. Because if your file is exposed on the internet, I can make a rogue file on my local machine, and if I can get in as a guest or a low-level user, I can start to look under the hood. If you're not using proper FileMaker Pro privilege sets and security, I can break any homemade, cobbled-together security system you've done. For example, hiding fields and thinking they're safe because they're not in any layouts anywhere. And this, where people really get bit by this is they try to base their security systems on global fields, and they don't secure those global fields with privilege sets. Well, I can make a rogue file, view those global fields that may not exist in any layouts, and start changing their values and figuring things out. So file access is very, very important. What I'd like to do now is jump back to the slides. 1 second here. Browse. Full screen. There we go. So the conclusions from looking at that demo file with the rogue file, use FileMaker's privilege sets, and we will probably have another presentation in FM Academy going into much more detail about privilege sets. But if you have been doing FileMaker, you've probably already set those up and know about them. Use file access and learn to properly use full access scripts and be very careful about creating them. Don't do full access scripts with passwords embedded in them and things like that. And make sure you set the file access so other people can't run these full access scripts with their own files and get around your security. Okay? Take advantage of the calc engine's power to see restricted data. This can be very powerful, so you can hide your data, but you can still allow users to work with it and use it in abstracted ways and in reporting and fun things like that. Do not think that hidden means secure. Just because a field is not in a layout, a global variable is out there that you don't think that users will find a way. Obscurity is not security. Okay, and again, I'm going to repeat, prevent outside file level access. That's really bad and will really mess things up. I want to touch on a few other minor topics here. The next one's credit card processing. For processing credit cards, I recommend 360works Plastic 2. It was just released about a month ago. Absolutely wonderful plugin for processing credit cards. It works with a number of gateways, and it's very easy to use. But the big advantage that it has is it supports tokenization. When you start storing credit card numbers in your FileMaker Pro database, you really open up a can of worms when it comes to PCI compliance and making that work. That's the payment card industry's rules and regulations of everything you have to do to manage all those credit card numbers. And if you're using a payment gateway, at some point you will have a PC audit where the bank will come in and they will say, show me your security, show me your encryption, show me everybody who has access to the files, how do you encrypt your backups, who has access to the credit card numbers, how do you delete them. And these audits will take you a full day probably to go through. They're not trivial matter. And depending on the results of that audit and how exposed your credit card numbers are, they will increase your rates. So be very careful with that. One way to really get flying colors to that is not store credit card numbers. And you can do that with tokenization. And what that means is when you're a website or when you take a credit card number, you don't actually store it in the database. You shoot it with a plug-in directly to your gateway, and the gateway gives you an ID number for that credit card. So basically they take your credit card number, which is an ID, and they give you another ID for it, and they store the credit card and the client's name and address and all that good stuff. And whenever you need to bill that client, you say, hey, bill token ID 134, $50, and the invoice is for 3 widgets. And then they will process that. That token will only let that credit card be charged to your account. So even if your database gets hacked and people try to use those tokens to capture funds, they can only capture the funds and give them to you. And you'll see that in your bank reconciliations and say, hey, something's going on, then the money never gets away. So that makes the bank very happy and makes your PCI audit very, very easy to get through because you're not storing that critical information. Another quick topic we need to go over is FileMaker Go user timeouts. When you set up users, remember we talked about booting users off the server if they're idle? Well, with FileMaker Go, you can control how long a user can jump to another app from FileMaker Pro, leaving FileMaker in the background, and when they come back to FileMaker, whether or not they have to re-authenticate to that file to get back to it. And all you have to do is create an extended privilege and add it to the privilege set that the users are using, and the last digits of that privilege set will be the number of minutes that the user is allowed to be away from the FileMaker Pro app while they're maybe running the CNS signature file or doing something else created in an email. And then they can come back and they don't have to re-authenticate the FileMaker Pro. The shorter you keep this time period, the safer your solution is. So if the user sets their iPad down, somebody else can't change to the database and do something with it. Another very important thing to remember with security is backups. If someone has physical access to your files, if I can get a copy of your files, all bets are off no matter what you do with privilege sets and fun things like that, because I can crank and bang and pound on that file with other tools and break it open. So you don't want to let people get at your physical files. So please turn off file sharing to your server, even to the backups folder. You know, if somebody can get a copy of them, they're going to get into your files somehow if they really want to. And this gets to be a real problem when you're using servers that aren't yours. Somebody else has your backup. So even if you leave that vendor and you're no longer hosting a file with them, make sure you have some kind of contract with them that says, hey, they've destroyed all copies of their backups of your files. Another important thing with backups is how many folks have actually ever tested your backups to make sure they work. I can't tell you how many times I've been called to a client because their server acted up for some reason. They had a hard drive failure, and they found out that their backup tapes are bad. The heads were out of alignment on the tape drive, or the USB cable had come loose and the backups weren't copying over at night. So test your backups. I recommend doing it monthly. Actually take a copy of the backups, copy them off the machine, put them on another machine, and try to open them. Make sure they work. And what about your offsite backups? You need to test those as well. And I mean, you do have offsite backups, right? So if your building burns down, the toilet in the room above the server closet overflows, and it destroys the server, it doesn't also destroy all your backups. And a great way to do this is with SafetyNet, another great product from 360works, which is a small free plugin that will zip up your backups and upload them to an Amazon EC2 disk drive for you that you have access to and nobody else. And this is a great way to do it. It uses FTP, very fast, very powerful. It's a wonderful plugin, and it's free. You do have to pay for your Amazon bandwidth. I am backing up a couple servers with this. My biggest one's about 700 megabytes, and every night, all month long, it zips up the databases and backs them up. And I think I'm paying about $12 a month for that to Amazon, which is pretty darn low for peace of mind of knowing that if the office burns down, I can sit down at any computer anywhere in the world, use my Amazon account, log in, download my databases, and have all my customer information ready to go and keep my business working. So please do offsite backups, but also verify your backups. Make sure they work. Make sure you know how to restore from them so that when the catastrophe happens, you're not fumbling around with owner's manuals and things like that trying to figure out how to restore from a backup. Know how to do it ahead of time. There's a great article on FM forums on backups, and this URL will again be in that blog post. You can get it there. There's a great PDF, and there's free ways of doing these backups if you don't want to work with safety net. There's batch files in there, and it's great. Be sure when you set up a new FileMaker server to remove the FileMaker server sample file after you've installed FileMaker server and tested everything. We don't need a file up on the server that's open to anybody in the world that just gives a vector into your server. No reason to have it there, just remove it. Don't leave your server console open when you leave your computer. Anybody who wants could sit down at the server and do whatever they want. They could download a copy of your databases. They could change your schedules. No need to do that. Keep that open only when you need it. If you have multiple FileMaker server admins, use the feature in FileMaker server of admin groups. This is a way to set up group access so that you can control which files each admin has access to. You can give them each their own group and password, and they can only mess with their files. So it's a great way if you have multiple admins to make sure they only touch their stuff. So in review, make it easy for your users to have secure passwords. Try to use a domain or an open directory, even if it's just on the server machine itself. It will save you a lot of work as an admin, and it will make your files much safer knowing that you have good, strong passwords and that they're properly managed. Use privilege sets correctly. Do not think that something that's hidden is invisible. It can be found. So use those privilege sets. Prevent rogue files. Use the file access stuff that's built into FileMaker Pro. Make sure your containers are safe. Turn on encryption. You don't want somebody who has access to your backups or has access to your server to be able to rummage through your files that you're embedding in the database. Protect your server console. Only allow access to the console from the specific IPs that will be used, not from everywhere. Don't leave it open when you do open it. It is basically the keys to the kingdom. It gives people physical access to your files. Protect that at all costs. Ask your IT folks about VPNs. Even better, demand they set up a VPN for you to get into the office and your files. That's by far the best way to prevent a lot of these problems from outside people getting into your solutions. Don't store data you don't need to store. And this goes back to the tokenization of credit card numbers. There really is no reason today for people to store credit card numbers. You know, take advantage of the gateways that'll take care of it and manage it for you. And test your offsite backups. Make sure they work. Make sure your backups are secure. If somebody has access to your backups, they have access to all the files in your system. There's also a great security guide on the FileMaker Pro website itself. It's the FileMaker documentation. It's one of their white papers on FileMaker 12 security. And again, this URL will be included in the blog post that will go up tonight. So remember, don't cobble your security. Use the tools we were given the right way, apply them correctly, and your system will be safe. Don't try to use tools the way they were not meant to be used. Thank you very much for your time. I think, John, do we have any questions from people today?
Yes, we do, Tim. Thank you very much for a very thorough presentation. Excuse me. Yes, there's a first question. Is there, you made a reference to that you should get rid of the FileMaker Pro server sample file that comes. Why is that a security risk?
Is a file that has admin access already in it with no password. It also has user privilege sets, and you can use it as a rogue file on the server. And why have something up on the web publishing engine, the instant web publishing ODBC? It uses every protocol in the system. And don't store more data than you need. Don't leave links in the chain to be broken.
Cool. Another question which I thought was useful is you mentioned having secure passwords for your users. Could you give some guidelines on what a secure password is?
Okay, there's actually a lot of discussion about this in the security world about what a secure password is. I can tell you what a secure password is not. That is any word that's in a dictionary, numbers, any basic short word, 8 letters with just a number, not very good. Um, and another very bad thing is using the same password in multiple locations. So if one place gets broken into, they can then take your account name and go try it everywhere else with that same password. I like to have a password algorithm for making passwords. Your friend for secure in a password is length. The longer your password, the more secure it is, whether it's all uppercase, all lowercase, all numbers. If you make your password 30 characters long, it's not going to get broken. Um, I like to run a password algorithm, and what I mean by that is when I'm logging into a system or making a password for a system, I will take, and well, let's come up with a new algorithm. I'm not going to tell you my personal algorithm.
You
I
should.
will take some letters from the name of the system, maybe the first 3 letters of the name. I will then append another word to that, maybe the name of my first pet that I ever had. So I have 3 random. Let's say I'm logging into Apple. I'll take APL, the name of my first pet. Maybe it was Fido, FIDO, and then I will put a date and a punctuation symbol after it. So basically, every system I log into has a different password. Every website I go to, I have a different password of a secure length. And if any one site or system gets broken into and those passwords are found out, they can't use that password to go log into other systems. And that's just a great way to do it. One of the algorithms that somebody I know uses, they will take the name of the system they're logging into, but instead of typing it in for the password, they will go one letter to the right on the keyboard. So instead of A, they'll type an S. Instead of G, they'll type an H. Instead of K, they'll type an L. And then they append their stock word and numbers to it to make a nice 12, 18-digit password for everywhere they go. And if any one person does find out what the password is for any one site, not knowing your algorithm, which is stored in your brain, they can't then decipher what you're doing. That, oh, he typed in S instead of A and a square bracket instead of a P for Apple. So that works out pretty well.
Cool. You mentioned that you should take a copy of your backups and test them. If I'm using external container storage, are there any things I should be aware of when I'm trying to take that backup copy and actually open it?
Yeah, when you are getting, your backups will be copies of the files, so all of the hard links in the backups, and you can go back to the FileMaker Server FM Academy webinar where we talk about the hard links and how the backups work. So you just want to take that backup, put it on a machine, disconnect that machine from the network, and then open those files up, uncompress them however they're stored, open them up, make sure all of the files work. And all your container fields should be there, they should be visible. You'll be using secure storage for your container fields, so you won't be able to browse around inside the RC data folder and see the container fields. But make sure that backup is fully functional, that it's not damaged in some way. Maybe your compression algorithm or your copy to tape is bad, and the files are getting corrupted when they're copied. So you really want to know they're working. You don't want to learn that a backup is bad when you really need the backup. I'd rather learn it when I don't need the backup.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, I have one last question, and that is, I think you talked to this, but the person was unclear. If I've got a Mac or a PC server and I don't have a domain, do I require any third-party software to use external authentication, or is that
No,
include?
No, it doesn't take any software. If you have an actual server OS, you can start up the directory service on that one machine. You don't have to build a full-fledged domain. You don't have to register your other servers with it. You really don't have to know how to do any configuration of it other than just telling the computer to turn it on and learn where the control panel is, whether you're on Windows or Mac, and start making new users and groups and associating them together so that your users are in the appropriate groups, and you create those groups within FileMaker Pro as account groups and tie them to the privilege sets in your database. And then you
Great.
can manage your passwords and users all from within that server UI for that user and group system, depending if you're in Mac or Windows, Open Directory or Active Directory.
Great, thank you. Okay, moving to the next slide, there's some ways you can make contact with Tim and or Geologic. We have email and Twitter. We'd appreciate you anyone following us. We publish a lot of information about best practices, and we'll continue to do so. We certainly enjoy the fact that you guys came today to the seminar, and hope you'll reach out to us if you're looking for more information. Tim, one thought that came to me was, are you aware of any checklists that are available if I want to do a security audit of my system? Are you aware of?
I don't know of a security audit checklist. That's a great idea for FileMaker Pro. I did reference two different places that are very good and almost checklist-like. The first one was the FileMaker Security Guidelines for 12, which talks all about privilege sets, setting up external authentication. Everything we talked about here is in that document, and the URL for that is going to be in the blog post. And then also the FM forums has some great material on security, and Stephen Blackwell's blog is also very good for learning about this. And all those links will be in the blog post, which will be going up right after this meeting.
Thank you. Next slide, please. And actually, next one. Yeah, there we go. This is our next FM Academy session. It's going to be handled by our friends in Philadelphia, IT Solutions. They'll be talking about keeping it clean using your database design report to assist in cleaning your database. Tim talked today about security issues that grow when your system gets older and bigger. The same is true of your data, and this should be a very valuable session. It's going to be held on August 20th at 2 p.m., and you will receive an invitation for that session. All you have to do is sign up just like you did for this one today. And the final slide, this is the list of people who are members of the FM Academy. These are the different companies. As you can see, they're located in various parts of the country, and I can tell you from knowing all these people well, there's a ton of expertise available. So if any of you are looking for help with a system or have a problem, either formally or informally, please feel free to contact any of these members. Further, if there's someone you're trying to get a hold of and you don't know their contact information, please feel free to contact us at Geologic, and we will make sure that your request and contact information is forwarded to them. Once again, everybody, thank you very much for attending, and have a great day. Take care.